Hello, welcome to Evangelistic Apologetics. This is a systematic introduction to Christian worldview. We're doing part 3 of a large series. We are calling this The Science of Science. Basically, it's an introduction, description, and study of science itself. And to understand what science is may help us to determine the validity of the theory of evolution, the macro theory of evolution. Okay. And we are now in our second part of this minor series, and it's called A Brief History of Science, Part 2. Okay. And we know that science is hard to define, just like truth is hard to define. But you sort of know what it is. The best way of finding out its definition and the standard, it's to look for the actual history, how it came about. So we have done half of a brief history of science. Science is not something sacred that is present only in the modern period. Actually, science appeared long ago. And actually, the first natural science appeared in ancient Greece. And that was part of the pattern of Western philosophy. In ancient Greece, part of the philosophy was science. Actually, it was the earliest of the Greek philosophy. It was materialistic philosophy. It has a lot of guesswork. People thought there are 4 kinds of existence. Fire, air, and earth, and water, and by that they combine things into the existence. And some people guess that everything was made of atoms, and that turns out to be right. And finally, if we look at the pattern of Western philosophy, okay, we see a pattern that it's related with epistemology. With how do we know? We have 3 methods of knowledge. And the basic way is experience, like babies. The experience who love them and who feeds them is the one who loves them. That's the first method of learning. As people go into teenage years, supposedly, they start to reason, think. Okay, they don't reach the ability of mature thinking until quite later. And when you are a mature person, then you recognize you need a worldview, and that is something you can only gain by faith, because you cannot use experience and reason to cover everything. You have to believe in something, and that's faith. There are 3 levels of knowledge, and human thought, the history of human thought, which is best represented by the pattern of Western philosophy, represents a sinusoidal wave in this. In the classical period of philosophy, 500 BC to AD 500, about 1,000 years, it starts from ancient Greece. It started from people like Democritus, and those material philosophers, the earliest scientists, and they believe there is reason, and they're looking for something to believe. Okay, they use reason, and later we had Plato and Aristotle that formed the 2 major branches of philosophy. Plato believes in the abstract, the universals, and he believes that the particulars are nothing but manifestations of the universals. Aristotle is the other way around. He believed the particulars are the real existence. The universals are nothing but characteristics or essentials, essence of the particulars. So these 2 thoughts each has its advantages. So the whole history is kind of just a back and forth and development of the whole thing. And a modern philosopher, Wittgenstein, said that all philosophers are footnote writers for Plato, which is pretty accurate. And in the classical period, science appeared as a material philosophy. Okay, it's the earliest of of philosophy. And then in the medieval period, the Christian period, from let's say 500 to 1500, about 1,000 years, and in that time people knew what to believe. They just need to use reason to systemize it and then obey it. So from there we had the systematic theology and the canon law. So everything is in order. And science appeared as natural theology. It's part of theology. It's just a theology about nature. Okay? And in the earliest medieval time there was Augustine, and in the later it was Aquinas. Augustine was a Platonist, top down, and Aquinas was an Aristotelian. He's bottom up. And this change marked the change in the world's thinking pattern. It's around 1300. You know. And then we had Occam, who invented the Occam's razor. He believed that the universals are actually just the essence, so it's Aristotelian. And he believes you don't need to assume so many universals. Your theory needs to be streamlined with as few assumptions as possible, with as many affirmations as possible. So that is called Occam's razor. You cut off unnecessary assumptions. And that was very important for science, because good scientific theories are like the pyramids, the top up, and very few assumptions received by faith. And they're usually called, what do you call them? The axioms, things in a logical system that you just assume to be true. You can't prove it, but you believe it, and it has been verified again and again by application that they are true. Okay? So Occam's razor is important. And then Francis Bacon, he believed that scientific method can be systemized as an induction from the particular events, and then you summarize into a large theory, a proposition. So induction is going from observation to proposition, and then the proposed theory needs to be verified by experiment. And that is called deduction, because you deduce from the big theory into a specific event. And then you verify it, then you affirm the theory. If you falsify it, then you need to modify the theory. And then you repeatedly using this method again and again, what do you have? You have the scientific method. So that is Francis Bacon's work. And it is, again, not unique to science. That kind of method is a universal method of searching for truth. It can be used in theology, in anything. But in science, because it studies nature and you can do experiments with nature, that made science having some kind of advantage, because once you can do experiments, you can have a definitive answer. If you can't do experiments, then it's just theory versus theory, arguments versus arguments. You can't finalize it. Okay. And pretty soon later, there was a change of worldview. And that's where we're going to actually start here. Copernicus and Galileo changed our view of the universe. You see, Aristotle, he had a theory about the universe. He believed that the universe is, the earth obeys natural law, but in the heavens is a different set of laws. Because by direct observation, the stars move around the earth, so there is a sphere, and the stars don't move in relative positions. So there must be some kind of a sphere that rotates around the earth. So that's by direct observation. It's not unscientific, actually. Isn't science starting from observation? Right. You observe the universe, you look at the stars move, keeping the same distance. So they are on a dome, and the dome rotates around the earth. And then the sun and the moon, they all rotate around the earth. However, there are a few wanderers, and that's called the planets. The word planet actually means wanderer, because it go irregularly. Sometimes it go retrospectively. It go backwards, so if you have primitive science, you have geocentrism. Okay? The earth is the center of the universe. And the laws on earth is not the same as the laws in heaven. because laws in heaven is something different. You don't know why the planets wander and so on, and you can even summarize the pattern, but you don't know why. Okay, and that kind of separation is not good. Modern science really started when people believed that there is one set of laws governing all existence, okay, all nature. So Copernicus proposed the solar centrism, okay, and heliocentrism, and if you change the coordinate system, put your origin rather than the Earth on the Earth, you put it on the Sun, then all of the planets' motions can be seen as a regular motion, and thus you reduce your number of assumptions. It's now one regular pattern, and simplicity always has an advantage over irregularity. So this is nothing actually of a change of the origin of coordinate system, but it simplified things, and also it made the laws in the heavens and on the earth united. So you require them to have unity. See, isn't science in ancient Greece born from from seeking for unity, from diversity? See, so that's why this is very good progress for science. And Galileo, he applied the same law, gravity law, on Earth. He dropped a ball from the leaning tower of Pisa, and they found out it fell on the ground and it has gravity. And then later we had Isaac Newton, and he gave birth to the modern or scientific period. Okay, so in the medieval period, science appeared as natural theology. At that time, people know what to believe in. They believe in God. They just systemize it using reason. However, since there are so many theories, like in the scholasticism, they can't settle how many angels can dance on one needle. And that's something they can't settle. So people got tired of it. They say, let's use experiments to decide which theory is right. And that's the foundation of the modern or scientific period. Okay, and this is from about 1500 to 2000. Around 1500, there are a lot of changes, and one of them is the Reformation. Slightly before it, Renaissance, and then Reformation. Then you have the Industrial Revolution and the Enlightenment and all of those things. So the modern scientific period starts from the Reformation period, and then Descartes, he believes that rationalism is the foundation of everything. He believed in reason you can explain everything. He said, I think, therefore I am. Okay? So rationalism starts from Descartes, and that's the philosophical beginning of modern period. And religiously, it's the Reformation. Martin Luther at 1517 nailed his 95 Theses. And then Isaac Newton, around 1600, he found out that Newton's laws on Earth governs also the laws in heaven, and the gravitational law. And that began the modern period. So we see that in the modern period, it was Christians who are the best scientists. Isaac Newton invented Newtonian mechanics. Michael Faraday and John Maxwell, not John Maxwell. What's his Maxwell? James Maxwell. Okay, Michael Faraday, James Maxwell, Louis Pasteur, and the Lord Kelvin. These people invented modern physics and biology. And Faraday and Maxwell invented experimentally and theoretically electromagnetism. They explained that. Newton explained he invented calculus, and then he found the gravitational law. He also found out the light have a spectrum, and he was really a talented man. Great contribution. Louis Pasteur is the one who found out that life can only start from life, because people usually think that if you put a boiled soup out there, it has no life, but pretty soon it's going to grow life. It's going to have maggots and then flies. However, they did not know it came from external source. So Pasteur, he sanitized, he pasteurized. He boiled it, sealed it, a bowl of soup, put it outside. No matter how long, it never has maggots. So he proved that life can only come from life. And that's very important. It's the beginning of modern biology. And Lord Kelvin found out the second law of thermodynamics, which explains the heat and energy, how they can change with each other. And he's the inventor of thermodynamics. And he also pointed out time has a direction, because in time, everything's order tend to decrease, while entropy, the measure of disorder, tend to increase. Okay. So this is all the foundational modern worldview, the science behind modern worldview. And Newtonian physics supports an absolute space and time. So space and time are independent and separate and uniform. And you might imagine that each of them is infinite. And if that's the case, then the world may be eternal. And if the world is eternal, then maybe there's no need for God to create. See, that generates the deism and then the atheism. However, there are several jumps in there. Newton still believes in creation because he believes in first push. If you don't have the first push, it won't start as it. And he also believed that the system is unstable, so God needs to maintain it. However, later, I think it was Laplace who proved that the solar system is stable. So further, less need of God because of that. And that pushed more people go from theism to deism and then to atheism. At least it opens the door. And then in the later modern period, you have Albert Einstein. He fundamentally changed our concept of space and time and energy and matter. For everything is one. They're not anymore separated, and they're not anymore independent. They're not anymore uniform. They are all united. And space and time combined to space-time. Energy and matter is energy-matter, and they are also united. For around the big mass, the space will curve. And Einstein's theory further points to that the universe needs a beginning. So, Newton believed the universe needs first push. And Laplace said, okay, no need of maintenance, but still cannot remove first push. And atheism says there's no first push, it's just eternity, but there's no proof in there, but it's possible. And now with Einstein's theory, he found that the universe cannot be stable state. It has to be expanding. And Hubble's law, Edwin Hubble's law, found out the stars are all leaving us. Isotropic, whatever. It's the same direction everywhere, and it's all leaving us, the Earth, or the Milky Way, a galaxy. So with those laws, you find out the universe needs to have a beginning. It actually affirms back to theism and pointing support to theism. And then Watson and Crick found that they are all the information of life are stored up in DNA. And so it seems there was a designer and put all the information into DNA, and it has genes, which are sections of information carrying part of the genome, the overall DNA. And that is the greatest, these few, Einstein, relativity, and then we have Max Planck and Niels Bohr and so on found quantum mechanics, and then Watson and Crick found out DNA. These are the greatest progress of modern science. And they are all based on that we believe in reason, but not all proposed theories are correct. And how do we determine which theory is correct? We use experiments, and that's experience. Okay? So modern science is basically using experience to prove to choose theory between theories, to prove or falsify. And during the scientific period, science has two directions. Because they use reason and they use experience, if you emphasize experience, then it's experimental science. That's how it has the reliability, because it's experimentally either verified or falsified, or at least supported. And then, however, there is a rational side which people, based on the few particular evidences, and they summarize a big theory. And before proving it, as long as they have summarized it from a few facts, they believe it's scientific. However, even though it's not verified, they still believe it's scientific, since science, part of science, have been verified and gained the reputation of being reliable, and the unverified science, which uses only half of the scientific method. They only use induction, not deduction, and verification. So the half science also claimed the credibility, okay? And that's why it can become ideology, idea. Okay, they're just ideas. They're not verified, but they are summarized from a few particular facts. They did induction, but not deduction with verification, experimentation. So that's ideology. Experimental ideology may seem to be contradictory, but that really was modern science. Two sides. You know, it's like a Janus. It have last year and next year. You know, January is named after Janus, the god of two faces, two sides. So there's an experimental side, which is reliable, and there's an ideological side, which is not reliable. But both of them claim the name of science. Okay, and because of this ideological element of science grew so strong, and it used social experiments and then caused a great disaster, people got tired of the scientific period. So right now we are in the postmodern period. Okay, the postmodern period is from 2000 plus, probably middle 1900s, and we go into postmodern period. And this in the postmodern period, we have the greatest representative thinkers are Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, and Jean-Paul Sartre, and Derrida and Foucault, and these are two French, Jacques Derrida and Michel Foucault. And these people are postmodern. Okay? And Nietzsche believed God is dead. Sartre believed in there's no meaning of life except whatever you do. You do it, and then you have meaning. And Derrida believes that the language cannot express ideas fully, and so there is no meta-narrative. There's no big story, okay? No universal truth. There's only piecewise personal truth. So your truth and my truth may be conflicting, but that's okay, because they're all both truth. It's just piecewise. You have yours, I have mine. And personal experience is now the only verification of truth. And Foucault and then made it into ethics, justified everything. Just what you feel right is right. So that is the postmodern period we are in. Then science now become the piecewise personal experience. Okay, so we see science was present all throughout all history. Okay, it just changed its forms. The modern scientific period is already over. During that time, science has two branches. One is the experimental side, one is the ideological side. And the ideological side now took control and caused havoc, and that's why people got tired of science altogether. They enjoy technology, but tired of the ideology, so they are going to piecewise personal experience. No more universal truth belief, except this truth. You know, when you say there is no truth, then is that the truth? You know, there's always a self-contradiction here. So when we at the transition from the modern period to the postmodern period, there is generally a rejection and replacement of biblical epistemology, metaphysics, and ethics. These are the three branches of philosophy. Okay, and after that, there's a categorical philosophy. But that's the application of these three. These three answered the three fundamental questions. What is there? I mean, how do we know? That's epistemology. What is there is metaphysics. Ethics is knowing that, then what should I do? Okay, those are the fundamental questions of life. Biblically, there are answers. Epistemology says that you can use experience and reason, but about the supernatural world, you cannot reason them out nor experience them fully. You can only believe God's revelation by faith. That's biblical epistemology. However, people rejected it, and now we have Descartes, who believes in reason alone, and David Hume, believed that only experience will matter. So he is empiricism, Descartes is rationalism, and then Kant said neither of them you're right. Kant said truth is kind of a black box. You can see the phenomena, the surface. You have to reason the noumena, the depth in it. So there's always a experimental side, empirical side, and the rational side. However, nobody can claim to be final. That's Kant's epistemology. Therefore, there's no absolute truth. It opened that. And metaphysics is the big picture. Friedrich Hegel believed that there is a kind of a one-directional progress of history, and he believes is God. He's a pantheistic, Western pantheistic. He believed God is the world, and God kind of revealed himself and evolved with the world. And he called the whole thing called the Geist, the spirit, And however, the pinnacle of the evolution is this German Prussian state, and where everything is in order. Well, Karl Marx disagreed. He said this society is not fair, so let's reverse it. Let the proletariat people rise up and rule, and that's Marxism. And Darwin gives an explanation of the past. He says we all came from no life to life, and low life to high life, and then Marx gives the end. We will go to the communism. So these people provide a replacement for biblical metaphysics, and then you go to Nietzsche, who replaced biblical ethics, which is pro-life, and he says, well, God is dead, so now you have to find strong man. And a strong man has to kill to keep order, to make history progress. And from Nietzsche came Hitler, came Stalin, and millions of people were killed in the 20th century. And therefore, after you reject the biblical philosophy, then what you have, science in culture, you have John Lennon, there's just hope and there's no reality. MacLean, which is Eastern mysticism, New Age. Gore, which believed in the global warming, which now have been falsified. And then Rawlings, which goes to witchcraft. So that's postmodern world. We still claim science as truth, but we become more superstitious than ever. Okay. So finally, what is science? Science is the result and procedure of using the logical procedure, includes induction and deduction, to study the objective world, especially nature. And that's our definition of science. So the core of science is using the logical procedure, and the object of study is nature. So not everything that studies nature uses the logical procedure properly, and neither the other way around. So we should be careful not develop science into science-ism. Okay, amen.